Hey everybody, it's May from Black Mountain Faith, and tonight we're going to do day 7 in our Bible reading plan, One Story That Leads to Jesus. Okay friends, so tonight we were supposed to do Genesis 22 through 24, I believe it was. Let's see. And I'm sorry that the videos have been going up kind of late each night. It's just, this has been a lot of work, and I don't want to do any shortcuts, so a lot of people are really enjoying the material. I had intended to do 3 videos today. I wanted to do this video we're doing now, and then I wanted to do Psalms 1 through 7 because we haven't done that yet, and it's part of our daily reading, a chapter in Psalms every day. But going through the PDF, I noticed that we're going to be going through Psalms quite a bit. So I'm still praying on how I want to do it because it's basically poetry, and so I'm not really sure how I want to do that yet. I have been reading it every day, and I have been making notes to the side, but I don't want to do it much like this because it's basically poetry. So I'll be coming back on that, and then I wanted to do a wrap-up video, like talking about some of the things that are in Black Mountain Faith, some of the things I'm going to be taking out, and some of the things I'm going to be bringing in. Don't freak out about things I'm taking out. There's something amazing coming in its place. But to be very honest, my friends, today I have been fussing over my dad quite a bit. He fell and injured himself, and he's a bit bloody, bruised, and sore very badly. Nothing broken, nothing bad, but you know, when you're an elderly person and you fall, it's kind of hard. So that's basically where a lot of my time has went today. But I'm really excited because, you know, we have come to one of my favorite parts in Genesis, which is the sacrifice of Isaac. So when we finished off, King Abimelech and Abraham had made a peace treaty, basically, and we see that Beersheba, the well that Abraham definitely wanted to keep into the agreement between him and King Abimelech, was, it means the well of the oath or the well of 7. And I learned last night myself that the well becomes an important place in Israel's history. So I'm kind of like hyper focused on the word Beersheba right now. Like, you know, how many times is this well going to show back up in all of our future readings? And I'm like, you know, trying to keep my eyes off of that. So it says, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Wow. Okay, so we have been all the way since chapter 12 here in Genesis, my friends. Since we've known him as Abram, we have heard of the promise of Isaac, this child that's coming for Abraham and Sarah. They had to wait till they were at 100 years old and over to get this child. They finally have this child, and now the covenant with God is he wants, you know, he tells Abraham, you have to go on top of the mountain that I'll tell you. I want you to give him to me as a burnt offering. And we don't see anywhere where where Abraham questions that. He doesn't say one word. He doesn't say anything. And we know from the notes I took earlier, when we had been early in the week, that a burnt offering is a complete offering to God, meant to atone for sins and to express complete devotion. So we know that that's what God is wanting from Abraham. He's wanting complete devotion. And I was like, man, can you imagine? You have waited and waited and waited for a child. And he keeps promising, the Lord keeps promising it over and over and over. I mean, every single chapter he has went all the way back through his promise of, I will give the land to your descendants. Your generations will be too countless like the stars in the sky. And now he wants you to give you back that child as a burnt offering. So we know that Abraham's a man of faith. We know that he completely believes God's promise and covenant. And from what I've read in commentary all throughout the day, is that this was a test of his faith in God, not in the covenant and the promise from God, but in Abraham's faith in God himself. So I wrote over here, Abraham's obedience showed that he trusted God even when he did not understand. He didn't debate or stall. And then I put in parentheses, no lingering. That's what we saw a lot doing back here in Sodom and Gomorrah. As he was lingering, he was hoping things would change. That's not what Abraham did. And I had even said last night in the reading, you know, when Lot was lingered, this is but he lingered. And I had mentioned, you know, he was not one of the righteous people. We know that Abraham has already been called a prophet. We know he's a true man of faith. And we know that he is trusting in God. He does not linger. He does not question it. He says, okay. And he gets up the next morning. He cuts the wood himself. He takes 2 men. He packs his donkey. And he's on his way. So on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. He had 3 days, friends. He not only gets up the next morning and is obeying, he's on his way. He has to wait 3 more days, 3 days of him constantly thinking about it every second of the day. And he doesn't change his mind. He doesn't go back. He doesn't disobey God. He doesn't ask God to change his mind. He doesn't ask God not to make him do this. He goes through with 3 whole days, does not say anything. He is committed. He's going to do this. And I said, he knew he needed to obey. There is no mention of his feelings because he walked with faith. God has been training Abraham and building great faith in him. Oh, and I put Abraham had 3 long days to think this over, and this made the test that more severe. This was further building his faith. That God's going to take care of this. He will provide. So down here I highlighted, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took it in his hand, the fire and the knife, so they went both of them together. Woo! Let's just stop there for a second. That one gave me chills when I read that one. I don't know about y'all. I don't know if y'all looked at it this way, but let me tell you the way I looked at it. We see the design of God's plan here for thousands of years before it ever happened. The son, the promise, willingly to be sacrificed to his father, carrying the wood himself up the hill, all with the promise of resurrection. He was asked to give up his son, though spared. God gave us his son. So we see Isaac carrying that wood all the way up the mountain, much like Jesus Christ carried the cross for our sins all the way up to Calvary. Ooh, a little scary. All right, it says, but the angel of the Lord okay. So Isaac's kind of like confused. I'm not too sure that he knows. Hang on. Okay, I'm sorry about that. My puppies were going a little nuts. So we know that Isaac has no idea when we see him ask his father, you know, where's the lamb for the offering? And Abraham says, God will provide. He'll provide the sacrifice. So they get all the way up to the top, and Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and had him on the altar on top of the wood. And then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. So at this point, we know that Abraham doesn't know how God's going to provide, but he's trusting in the ability of God to either raise Isaac from the dead, um, something, okay? Because he fully believes God's promise and the covenant between them. And at this point, he is totally trusting in God to stop this, because God's promise is that all future generations are going to be the offspring of Isaac. So he knows, even if I do this, something's going to happen. Isaac is the fulfillment of the prophecy and the promise between the covenant of me and God. So even he did not stop believing or trusting God just because he didn't know how God would fulfill the promise. And it says, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he said. Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his thorns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. So we know that Abraham had that knife. He was ready to go out and do what he had to do. He was going to obey no matter what. He knew that God would take care of the situation, and sure enough, he did. He provided the lamb caught in the thicket so that he could give the burnt offering. It says, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and the sand that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived at Beersheba. And then down here, I circled like this whole passage, because this was like, it says basically that when he gets back to Sarah, they get back to their encampment, he finds out that Milcah has had children, and she's like his, it's his brother Nahor's wife, so that would be like his sister-in-law. And they're just going into all these children that are being born, and I put, and thus it begins. Here's the offspring of everybody. Everybody's having children now, and they're all his chosen people at this point, because the fulfillment of the prophecy out of the covenant is starting to happen. We can see that here. He gets home with blessed news that his family is having more and more children, and his own child has been spared. So we get to the part that hurts. God affirms once again his promise, covenant with Abraham, because he obeyed God's command to sacrifice Isaac. So we get down to chapter 23 in Genesis, is Sarah's death and burial. And Abraham is very distraught. She was 127 years old when she died. And this was an interesting fact I found out during commentary today, is that nowhere are we told in the Bible to look to Mary, the mother of Jesus, but we are told to look to Sarah as an example of a godly woman twice. I was like, really? We've never been told that about Mary? And it even gave me the verses, Isaiah 51, 1 through 2, and 1 Peter 3, 3 through 6. I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. So we know that all the land of Canaan is the promised land, and it all belongs to Abraham, and he doesn't have a little piece of paper of a deed. He's got something better. He's got God's promise, all of it's his. But he does go into, he goes to buy a burial tomb for Sarah. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and a foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered Abraham, hear us, my lord, you are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. And Abraham, He rises up and then he bows down to the Hittites and the people, and he said to them, "If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah." Machpelah? I think that's how you say it. Which he owns. So I found out, because I was like, this is kind of like weird. I thought, as I was reading, I was like, okay, so the guy's offering it, and Abraham's like, no. And he goes, okay, well, it's 400. And he goes, okay, because it was 400 pieces of silver. I was like, why is that? Why are we reading so many verses about this? Okay, well, there's a reason why. And I was like, all right, yeah. I always love my commentary, because when I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, I completely understand what the verses are saying. I just don't know what's like the importance of it. You know what I mean? So Ephron the Hittite is following the cultural customs of bargaining. First, the seller offers to give the item, confident that the buyer would refuse the ceremonial offer. And that's exactly what Abraham does, because he says, you can have it. It's basically what he says over here. He says, "No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead." And then Abraham bowed down to the people and said, no, we're not taking that. So when the buyer would refuse to receive it as a gift, the seller suggested a price, which he claims is modest, but very, very high. And this was the starting point for Abraham to try to bargain, down the price. Like, let's get it a little bit lower. But Abraham doesn't do that. When he says 400 shekels of silver, Abraham counts that out. He's like, all right. Abraham showed how a follower of God should conduct business with the world, courteously, fairly, and prudently. He was generous in his dealings with Ephron. And at the end of the day, he gets a piece of property deeded to him. And what's crazy is he owns, by the promise of God, all the land of Canaan, but he only walks out there with that one little piece of paper, in a deed, which is really funny, because he doesn't care about the piece of paper. He does care about the tomb, and the tomb becomes the great tomb of the patriarchs, where we're going to bury Jacob, Joseph, Abraham, and I believe even Moses. It's been a while since I've been in the Old Testament, like reading it all the way through. But yeah, this is a very important passage here, is because he dealt extremely generously with Ephron the Hittite, and he does get a piece of deeded paperwork out of it. And that's how throughout every generation, no matter who dies, who comes along, it's definitely their tomb. So I just thought that was really interesting, that that's what the purpose was there in chapter 23. Okay, so we get down here to chapter 24, which is Isaac and Rebekah. And it starts out, he tells Eliezer, he says, "Put your hand under your thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take away from my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell." And I was like, hand under your thigh? But it's just an ancient custom, and it's described as a solemn and serious oath. And it says, Isaac was the son of promise, never once left the promised land. His wife was to come to him as Isaac stayed in the land of Canaan. This principle was so important that if the woman refused to not come with the servant, it was better for Isaac not to have a wife, in Abram's, opinion. Abraham insisted on this because God made a covenant promise to Abraham and his descendants that Canaan was theirs. And so he did not want the servant, if the girl said no, that he was, to approach. And his family's, he wants him to go back to his homeland to get him a wife. And if for some reason the girl or her family says no, and normally what you would do in that situation, according to this passage here, is he'd come back and he'd get the son and see if the son could get her to willingly, come back and be his wife. And Abraham's like, no, we ain't doing that. She either comes on her own, or that's the end of it. We ain't doing that. But he's not marrying a woman from Canaan, where I live. He's going to marry from my homeland. So the servant agrees to it and says, I will do it. So down here it says, where am I at? He says, To your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take away from my son there. He's letting him know the Lord is going to be with you. And his servant, Elazar, I think that's how you say his name. I wrote his name over here. Elazar. Okay, Elazar completely believes in God. Okay, we know he is a man of faith, that we know he believes. And he goes to the Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he takes 10 camels with him. He takes a lot of gold, a lot of silver, a lot of expensive things, because he's basically going to be giving a dowry to whatever woman's family that he chooses for Isaac. So he says a prayer before he encounters Rebekah. He says, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of the water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master." Well, that's cool. He's asking God for a sign. I wrote over here, in praying this prayer, the servant knew that it would have to be a remarkable woman that would volunteer to do the tedious task, of watering these camels. Because I found out camels can drink up to 20 gallons of water. And watering 10 of them bad boys is going to take you at least an hour. And that's a lot of work. So he's asking for something that's very specific. Okay, so that way he'll know that it is the will of God that he talks to this girl. And not, waste his time to keep on going. Because he's wanting to do what is right by his master. And so, sure enough, Rebekah comes out. Abraham's servant cares nothing about how the woman looks, okay? He wants to look for a woman of character, a woman whom God has chosen. And that is why he asked for that specific, criteria, is that she'll say, yes, I'll give you a drink and I'll also water your camels. So she comes out and he says, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord, and quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. And when she finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water. And she drew for all the camels. The man gazed at her in silence, and he gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. He wants to see, and the reason it's said that way is because he wants to see if she stops halfway through. Okay? Because it's a lot of hard work. And I wrote over here, Rebekah was very beautiful and began the hard work of watering all the camels. The servant did not stop her. He wanted a woman who would not only say she would water the camels, but who would actually do the hard work. And he was amazed when she did exactly that. And when the camels finished drinking, he runs up to her and he just he lets all the cat out of the bag, right? He's like, here's a gold nose ring, here's some bracelets, and he's giving her lots of gifts, and he's telling her why he's there. And he asks, who's your family? And when she replies to him that she says, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. He realizes right there that that's Abraham's people. He not only went to Abraham's homeland to find a bride, he found one from his family, and that made him very, very happy. So the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. And when her brother Laban comes out, she tells him she's got the best news, right? So she's telling him. And then he goes up to him and he goes, man, why are you standing there by the camels? You need to come on in the house. And he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So the man came to the house and unharnessed his camels and gave straw and fodder to the camels. And there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Then food was set before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have said what I have to say. And he spoke on. So Elazar, all in this pink, right? He is just laying it all out. He tells about how he swore a solemn oath, what Abraham wanted, that he's a God-fearing man, that the God has been blessing him. He's very wealthy. He has a son. He's actually their family. Elazar just gets it all out, and he's really, he says the word, my master, occurs 22 times. And his words were a praise for Abraham. Not like, not like, I wish I was independent of him. Nothing like that. Total adoration and total respect for his master, which is Abraham. And that he was wanting to reiterate this entire passage, that he does not act on his own. He is just the bond servant of Abraham. And I wrote over here, Elazar knew that for some it's much easier to talk like a servant than to actually serve. He wanted to see if she had a servant's heart, not only a servant's talk. After she fulfilled the sign he had prayed for, he immediately revealed precious gifts for her. This was a sign of his generosity and the wealth of the master he represented. He praised God when he found out that she was related to Abraham's family. And Elazar did not eat or rest until he had done what he was sworn to do by Abram. And when he's done with the story, Laban and Bethuel mother says, this thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you, bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. So it's the evident hand of God is in this situation, is the way that they're looking at it. And Elazar immediately gives them a large dowry to demonstrate Isaac's ability, to provide for his new wife, all in good faith. He has done what he's been asked to do. And as far as he knows, he's going to bed. Next morning, him and Rebekah are getting up. The 10 camels and the men he took, they're going home back to Canaan, to Abraham, to deliver Isaac, his wife. So he's very happy about this. But when he wakes up, they said, let the young woman remain with us for a while, at least 10 days. After that, she may go. Some commentary saying that Laban, her brother, is trying to get more money in the dowry. Others say that, it's hard as Christians. Sometimes we get very excited at first, but to continue and to actually do what we say we're going to do, to keep moving forward. It's really hard to steer a parked car. You know what I mean? You got to keep at it. You got to keep moving. Some people say that that's what that's about. Personally, I kind of think it was just the mother and the brother wanted to delay the leaving, most likely because of kind of like a combination of all of it. Maybe they might get some more money out of it, but I really think the mother's heart just wanted her daughter to stay a little. I don't know. I've read so much commentary that it just doesn't seem like there's a clear, people agreeing on it. But basically what it happens is Elazar is like, no, man, we're going. So she goes, they said, let us call the young woman and ask her. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? She said, I will go. So they sent Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men on their way. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, O sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate you. So, as put, Rebekah showed remarkable willingness to leave everything she knew for a man she had never seen, and it speaks to her faith. So, the servant and Rebekah, they get on their way. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, it's getting late at night. Now, Isaac was in, here's that word again, Beer Lahoroi, and was dwelling in the Negev. Basically, he was going out in the field to meditate. He sees his dad's bondservant, Elazar, on his way back. He's walking out to meet them. And Rebekah goes, who is that? And he says, that's my master. That's Isaac. And so she gets off her camel, and she took her veil and covered herself. And that signifies chastity, modesty, and submission. So it says, then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And I put over here, Isaac and Rebekah coming to each other can be viewed as instructive and intuitive. They were more concerned with God's will for their union, and they didn't want to base it on the love for each other, because this is an arranged marriage. You know what I'm saying? And she willingly takes part in it because she feels like it's ordained by God. So it's not based on, like in today's times, affection, love, strong feelings. She based it on the will of God, which really speaks to both her and Isaac's character. And then I had this in my stash, and I put, God's plans are enduring and apply to every generation. As we know, he had a plan with Isaac. His plans take precedence over the plans we make for ourselves. And that's actually Psalms 33:11. That I'm basing that quote on. But I really liked tonight's reading. I have always liked the story of the sacrifice and how the ram shows, right at the last moment for Abraham. Because I'm going to tell you what, that's a test of faith. I would have failed. I would have failed it all day long. And 2 times on Tuesday. Not even going to lie to you. But I really enjoyed tonight's reading. And I'm really happy that I stuck to the reading plan for 7 straight days, my friend. I made stickers every single day. I really got into the commentary and enjoyed it. And I'm really excited to keep this going. And look, I've put notes on 33 pages, and I barely have a footprint. I have so many things I would like to share with y'all, but that is not part of the Bible reading. So I will come back tomorrow with another video, and I hope that y'all have stayed. If you haven't read it yourself, I'm just hoping that maybe you've watched the videos all week and let me read and tell you what you might have missed. So until I see you for another video, y'all have a nice night. Bye.